This is Marnie Associate Trainer with Art2Ride. Before I get started, I just wanted to express my gratitude to Will and Karen for their endless generosity in sharing their knowledge and their support. It has made a world of difference in my life and my horse training, and I look forward to continuing that education. So thank both of you so much for all you do. So what you're watching here is a quick workout I had with Charlie. This was probably around the end of November. It was the last ride I had on him before the days got too short and the bad weather started to roll in. Fortunately, I was able to fly to California this year to start my new endeavor of becoming a certified Peter Horobin saddle fitter. I worked with Karen for a few days, going out to different farms for saddle fittings and adjustments. We worked in her shop and used her horse cue for demonstrations as she taught me the ins and outs of the craft. Almost all of my students are riding in Peter Horobin saddles, so it was becoming increasingly important, especially this year, that I had the knowledge and the equipment to be able to do adjustments on these saddles. By the end of my trip, I was ready to go home and start playing around with my own saddles. So the ride you see here is after an adjustment to Geneva monoflap that I purchased used. I also own a kids pool as well, but felt more comfortable in a slightly smaller seat, and I like the support of the external thigh blocks. My apologies for the video not zooming in on my ride. I did use the Pixio, but it was being temperamental that day. So normally I would do a quick lunge before getting on, just to warm up Charlie's muscles and get him stretching and working over his back. However, I did not do that on this day, but you can see that he has no problem going right into the stretch. I start off with my walk in the stretch and quickly move into lateral movements, specifically the shoulder in, which you see here. He does all right, but gets a little overbent in the neck at times. Another one down the long side, which to me is better on the second half of this line. And then letting him stretch on the short sides. In the rest of this video, I've added an update on Winchester, the Dutch harness draft cross, 2 clips of new students that have specific training issues that I suggest solutions for, and a quick mounted exercise to stretch out your legs and hip flexors to help you get your leg underneath you for proper shoulder, hip, heel alignment. So still playing with our shoulder ins, getting Charlie to engage and lift his back. I'd like to see my shoulders come back and down more. I know this is one of my biggest hurdles, which I definitely let slip this year due to all my yoga classes being canceled. Although I will say it felt a bit easier for me to keep my shoulders back in this saddle, and particularly on Charlie, more so than on other horses that I ride, which you will certainly see how far forward I get on Winchester later on in the video. I believe partially this is because I have 2 slip discs in my lower back, and the other part due to the horse not carrying itself well over its back. The more you feel the horse lift, the easier it is for the rider to feel like they can almost lean back on the wave a lifted back creates, which naturally helps you to stay upright. For me, if I don't feel the push, it makes me want to lean forward, take weight off their back, and protect my lower back. However, this can also be counterproductive by making the horse feel unbalanced if I don't keep my center of gravity behind the wither, aligning my sternum with my horse's sternum. As we go along here, his walk becomes more fluid and open. The stretch is becoming deeper with his nose slightly more in front of the vertical, which is where I would like it to be. You'll see throughout this video, Charlie still has that tendency to want to come behind, though it does improve as the work goes on. I give Charlie a few minutes to get ready for his trot workout. Normally, when I lunge first, he gets all his coughing and scratching or whatever adjustments he needs to make before we get into it. And also the feel of a different saddle today, so I give him a little extra time to get himself ready. So here we're just establishing our contact in the trot. I want to be able to feel that if I lift my hands even just slightly and release, that he will settle into my hands and stay there. So until I feel that connection, I won't be able to bring him up into the working trot. So I just wait for him to settle. For those of you who don't know, Charlie is this year a 19-year-old purebred Andalusian gelding. And I'm happy with the sitting trot here. Um, there's no obvious disruption to his gait. So then I start bringing him more consistently into the working gaits. I would like to see him take the bit a little further out and poke his nose out a bit more here. The canter is starting to feel nice and balanced. He's getting stronger through the canter transitions now. I probably would normally have done more lateral work in the trot, which would have helped him to engage more and help with opening up his frame, but I was on a time constraint this day. And I just give him a little break before we canter to the right. Another flaw I need to work on is keeping my arms from coming too far behind my body. Oftentimes in this video I'm riding with too long a rein. The best trot work today was after his canter, which is usually what I see out of him and most of the horses. Nice down the diagonal here. So every yearly submission I like to throw in comparison clips of the years prior. So I slowed his walk down for a better look here. And then here are the collections of the past 6 years and how his walk has developed over that time. Notice how the consistency and quality of the stretch developed first, followed by the consistency and quality of the stride length. Now we move on to Winchester. Before this ride, we did our lunge work, which he is developing a very nice, relaxed, loose, deep stretch, and is able to do so in all three gaits now. However, mounted is still a different story. Once on his back, he becomes quite tense and defensive. He did spend the summer at my farm, which was a nice break for him from this particular indoor arena, which is where he seems to have the most anxiety. He's had a few bad experiences in this ring, which most likely contributed to his anxiety and him feeling less confident here than in most other arenas. While at my farm, we were able to settle him enough to be able to walk, trot, and canter, which we hadn't been able to do in years. His spooking had started to become less and less, although it was still difficult to trust him in the stretch, as his spooks always seemed to come with no warning. So our goal for the year was just to have quiet, uneventful rides every time, even if that meant being mounted for only 10 minutes. We take it as slow as we need to, working towards slowly erasing the insecurities Winchester has built up. It's important to remember that you can't force relaxation. Yes, I can force a horse to put his head down, but the result I would get would be a more anxiety filled, tense horse with a more unpredictable ride. So that's why I just wait for him to realize he can let his guard down. And while waiting, I'm encouraging the stretch by using my circles to help him engage his inside hind leg with subtle massaging of my inside rein. I go back and forth each direction after a few circles, and he starts to become more relaxed and willing to stretch left. Another reason why I switch directions often, so that when he gives me a try one way, he is rewarded by allowing him to go the other way. I'm careful not to drill any exercise with him, as that typically makes him more nervous. You'll see my shoulders are very forward in this ride, which is not ideal, but by the end of the ride, once he starts to stretch, I am able to sit up a bit more. Today was actually a good day, and that spook that you saw was really the extent of it, which a year ago would have escalated into a bolt. And not only would he have the tendency to hollow and want to bolt off, but he wasn't able to settle back down after it. He would stay in flight mode for most of the ride. So it is progress that he can come back to me and start using more of his left side brain. This is a typical ride in that I usually don't get what I'm looking for until the end of the ride. His trot work, although not in this stretch and seeking contact, but you see moments of him attempt to lengthen his top line. I use the trot work more at this point to help him get to where I want him to be in his walk work. And you'll see moments of him think about hollowing and running, but I'm able to put inside aids on and he comes back to me instead of him reacting negatively to the aid. I use the same exercise in the trot that I used in the walk by going both directions and working both sides. I'm cautious to make sure my rein contact doesn't feel restricting, but is also there as support and clear communication if I need to soften him and encourage him to relax. You'll see he starts to test the waters at lowering his head and neck, and that comes sooner tracking left than tracking right. And just as a side note, this horse has an amazing owner who has been wonderful in allowing the time that he needs to work through his issues. She also provides regular chiropractic and body work. He has been looked at by multiple vets and professionals to rule out any physical issues, as well as saddle fit issues that could be causing him any discomfort. What I love about this ride is that it gets better and better as we go on. It's not about where you start, but where you finish. And I was happy with the progress we had throughout this session. I am purposely keeping our circles small, which I will gradually make larger in time when the trust and the connection between us in the stretch develops. So, my next clip is of one of my students whose complaint was that at the walk her horse feels racy, uncomfortable, and a bit out of control. If she gathered the reins or pulled back, it would, to slow him down, it would just feel worse. You can see that although his head and neck are low, the horse is over tempo and on its forehand, and there's a lot of movement in the rider's body, not in a left to right swing motion, but in a rocking motion from front to back. The horse is also hollow and inconsistent in the stretch. So, what is the solution? It may feel counterproductive to add leg to an already over-tempo horse, but by asking him to engage his core and lift his back by manipulating that inside leg, It will actually slow him down by allowing him to balance himself and take longer strides so he doesn't feel so rushed. First, we had to teach the horse on the ground that the leg doesn't always mean to go faster, and can also mean to step his inside hind leg deeper under his body. We used the whip and our rein contact to help him understand. Then we can start to translate that to the saddle. After some practice, you can see that the rider is starting to influence the horse to better balance itself. The strides start to get longer, he gets more consistent in his stretch, and there is not as much motion in the rider's body. My next student is a new horse owner who purchased a 20-year-old saddlebred who was a lifelong lesson and show horse. After introducing the basics of work in hand, she noticed her horse bulged his shoulder towards her and rooted the reins going to the right. So what is the solution? In the beginning, it's okay to work only with the inside rein aid to help initiate any kind of stretch. Even if he wants to pull out of the circle, which you will see Major here do often, meaning he will attempt to lengthen but then want to immediately turn out of the circle. Once he starts to understand, he can lengthen his head and neck down. He can then start to allow the vertebrae in his spine to create space and become more mobile laterally. A stiff, tense horse will not be able to flex his spine and allow any kind of bend through the body. We found that working Major on both sides for a few minutes each way, multiple times, helps him to relax quicker and start to stretch sooner. You can see he is a bit more balanced, and it's much easier for him to step under his body tracking left than it is for him going to the right. The work in hand is the start to developing Major into a more symmetrically balanced horse. And I just want to say kudos to these two ladies for taking on these two older lesson horses and giving them a new lease on life. And finally, we have our mounted leg stretch exercise demonstrated by Dorothea and her horse Mickey Finn. This clip is when she just got on, so she didn't even know I was filming. But you can see how forward her leg is. If we whisked the horse out from under her, she would surely land on her butt. The toe of her foot is literally next to the horse's shoulder. The exercise goes like this. Stand up in the stirrups with your heels as high as they can go. Keeping your heels up, best you can, sink downwards towards the pommel of the saddle by bending your knees like you're going to kneel down. Your lower leg will swing back the further you sink, but don't sit yet. Still standing, level your foot. Now sit. This is where your leg should be. It's important to understand that there may be other factors restricting your leg from comfortably and effortlessly staying under you, such as an imbalanced saddle. Also, There is something to be said for horse rider suitability. Riders who have legs that aren't long enough to go past the break of the horse's barrel are going to have a little extra challenge of keeping their leg in the correct position. Notice the difference of where Dorothea's leg was before stretching out to where they are after the exercise. I have found doing this exercise with my students a few times before their ride helps them to become more aware of their body alignment. That's all I have for this year's submission. Hope you all enjoyed it. Feel free to contact me with any questions. Once again, this is Marnie Macaborski with Art2Ride. Thank you for watching.